One. Good.
Welcome everybody to Learning with Syeyutsus. Our project around Learning with Syeyutsus is a Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools project around implementing Call to Action 57 from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's Calls to Action. My name is Ted Cadwallader. I'm one of your co-hosts with Sweetleton Tanat, Stephanie Johnson, and Tzomquatan, Lawrence Mitchell. As we follow the protocol of this territory, I'm going to turn it over to our brother Lawrence to welcome us and open our house. Yeah.
Mute.
Hajka. Nan zaput ia tola taitsonomet tunaquil haitabka nizap siet tanashwakwa Georgina Martin Hajka Hamita Themat CIs at School District 68 Hajka CM and that's we lachent to skop the tunaquil. I'm going to share a blessing over our gathering and share a song as well. Haitzap. CM. Sweat quans imisht umuk stem eat umuk sweat. Heichka. Heichka quat quan stoch umuk stem utana quail. Heichka utta house squail. Heichka utta heil ait mit tamo. Eat umuk stem eatan a. Utan a quail it umuk squail. Ni tsep patamat nawa I amastal akwitha echqualwin. T'ihwa mi quam stuch to squalwin tst. T'ihwam I huilasmit tanashwalakwa awa iswa inamit. T'ihwam I slachen stuch to kaki mulstimach. T'ihwam I slachen to kika the shwalakwa. Heitka quits twa I tanatamo. Utan a quail itumak squail. Nawa squamquams at a salist. Heitka. Oh, 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 he. Whoa, hey. Whoa, hey. High to high oh I square. High to high oh I square. High the tar the High the tar the
Hey. I love when we follow that protocol of starting with language and starting with gratitude. Auntie Joan tells us that the land speaks that language. So when we start with that language, the land joins us in whatever it is that we're doing. And when we start with that gratitude, it makes our days always go that much better. So thanks for carrying on those teachings for us, my brother. We appreciate that. I want to express my thanks to our colleagues, Vancouver Island Regional Library. If you're in a meeting today in a library, or if you're just hanging out in a library, reading a book and listening in, we're glad that you could join us. And also our great friends at UBC Press, Carrie Martin, and the team there that connects us with all of these amazing knowledge keepers and thinkers and authors along the way, and that this venue where they can share that knowledge with you on whatever journey you're on. Wherever you're at today, please jump into the chat and pop any questions in that you might have for our amazing guests today and our beautiful background that she has. We're so pleased today that Dr. Georgina Martin could join us. She is a Secwepemc knowledge keeper and scholar and curious about the world on the journey, the same as the rest of us. Professor at Department of Indigenous Studies at Vancouver Island University, just up the road from where Stephanie and I and Lawrence are located here in Halktumaitnam speaking territory on the west coast of what's now Canada. Dr. Georgina, we are so pleased that you could join us and talk about your book, Drumming Our Way Home. It's a beautiful title, it's a gorgeous cover, and to share with us what you've learned along this way so that we can carry on this journey of what we're embarked upon, joining together in reconciliation. Syeyutsus for joining us today.
Okay, I'm going to follow suit with Lawrence and Ted in regards to connecting to the land and to the language. So I'm going to begin in a good way by sharing a prayer in the Secwepemc language and also my introduction in my language as well. Kukstachkuch de Geldkukbi, de Gestachkuch de Tmuchs, Yuchaminda Hochwed de Stem, na Elia na Tmuch. Yuchaminda Regalmuch Tamasmeschens Biu Yiselchwa Elra Stiflenskuch, Knuchwindaguch as Yayads. Kukstachkuch de Geldkukbi, de Gestachkuch de Hochwed de Stem. So our prayer is for giving thanks for everything that we've got, for the land, the water, the birds, our food. So now I'll introduce myself in the language as well. Wade Kwochwaidap, Georgina Martin Ren Squext, Kukstecham de Wen Echquin Elia, Swepemchen, de Tlakel de Stlakwan, de Moomdwan de Prince George, Echra Elkstoin Nanaimo, Ech Vancouver Island University, Nancy Moise Ren Kia, Ned Moise Ren Chba'a, Heid Sepka McThwaite, Heid Sepka Squamish Mastimoch, Ita Tamoch, Nihai. So right now I am currently situated on the traditional and unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. And I'd also like to acknowledge the territory of the Snuneymuxw, the Watson, and the Tliamin, upon whose territories Vancouver Island is situated. I'd also like to acknowledge the sponsors of this great event that we're here joining with you today. The Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools, UBC Press, and the Vancouver Island Regional Library. I think it's really important that this information is shared far and wide and that we're able to participate in these events. And I'd also like to share how I really appreciate that we are looking at the TRC call to action number 57. In my teaching at Vancouver Island University with my students, we're always looking at the calls to action, as we have 94, and I believe at last count there might have been 14 that has been completed. So I'm always encouraging students to see what they can take up in regards to trying to move forward with truth and reconciliation. So I'm just going to share the one we're looking at today. We call upon federal, provincial, territorial, and municipal governments to provide education to public servants on the history of Aboriginal peoples, including the history and legacy of residential schools, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, treaties and Aboriginal rights, Indigenous law, and Aboriginal Crown relations. This will require skill-based training in intercultural competency, conflict resolution, and human rights and anti-racism. So it's an excellent topic. So I'm also going to now explain to you the cover of my book, and I've got a little, I think you can see this too. But I wanted to point this out because this is actually where the idea came from. It's artwork, and I don't have the artist's name handy, but I was given a card when I was doing some work with UBC while I was supporting an elder. I drove her over to do some work, and they're doing work on eco playgrounds for children. So while I was there, I shared with a lady, her name is Dawn, in regards to recent losses that I have been experiencing. And I've lost 2 children. I lost my son, and it was 2 years on January 16th, and I lost my daughter, and it's going to be 3 years on Friday, 3 years tomorrow. So she gave me this card, and I sent the card to UBC Press, and I said I would like something similar or something that kind of corresponds with this art piece. So that's how they came up with the cover of my book. And I said I needed to also have a drum included in it. So I think you can see the book cover. So the two eagles at the bottom of the book, or at the bottom, represents my grandparents, because they're my foundation, and I still ride with them, and I seek advice for them, even though they are in the spirit world, but we're always talking to our ancestors. And the 2 eagles up on the top are my son and my daughter, because I needed to keep carrying them with me. And they're also ancestors, so they're lending me their support. And in the middle of the book is a hand drum, and that's part of the culture that I come from. And you can see that it looks like there's a dream catcher, and there's also one of my drums has that background. It was a drum given to me by my nation, Williams Lake First Nation. So that's how the idea of the book cover came about. So now I'd like to switch over. I've got a few slides that I'd like to share, and then I'll go back to the rest of my other information.
Okay. And everything's going to work just beautifully and smoothly here.
When you were speaking, I hope you saw all those beautiful hearts come up.
I did.
Yeah.
Thank you to everyone. So first of all, I'd like to locate myself relationally, and this is what the work that I do in my classroom as well. With all the courses that I teach, one of the priorities for me is to assist students, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, with self-location. For me, this is really important because it's connecting to our identity, and especially for anyone that is going to be working with and alongside Indigenous people, it's so important that we're able to not only locate ourselves, but also find our location in alignment with Indigenous people. So that's why I do this type of work. So I am from the Secwepemc Nation. I grew up in my community, which is Tekel, and also known as Williams Lake First Nation. And I gained my ancestral knowledge from my grandparents. They raised me from birth So here's a map of myself within the Secwepemc territory and also within British Columbia. Within the Secwepemc Nation, we've got 17 communities, and it branches way out to the BC-Alberta border. And if you can see my cursor, I am from here, from Williams Lake, and my community is also known as Sugarcane. And I am currently located on Vancouver Island. This is where I currently work at Vancouver Island University. And I also work with Lingara on the mainland. I'm doing a research project with Lingara at the moment. And my home community is here where I grew up, which is kind of not quite halfway up the province. And I have been living here in Prince George since 1982, and I still refer to Prince George as my home. So you'll see Prince George is halfway up the province, and it's quite cold up there right now. Okay, let's not go into the next, right here. So the hand drum, as you can see by the name of my book, is the heart of my journey. And the hand drum is what kept me grounded to my community, to me as an individual, back rooted to the land, and also a constant reminder of our cultural connections and the importance as well of learning the language. So I used this hand drum. This is the original hand drum that I use, and it's formed the epistemic and theoretical framework of my PhD research, which then became the book that I'm sharing with you at the moment. I also developed these slides that you can see on the side here. These are the baskets that are also in the book, and these are original baskets. And Jean, as Elder Jean, gave me permission to use them, so I've been using them sometimes in my presentations. But they are in the book as well. So my grandfather teachings was, he always told me that I was never to forget where I come from. And that's what also kept me grounded. This is the community where I grew up. It is Williams Lake First Nation, and we are located 7 miles south of the city of Williams Lake. And the nation is quite strong and growing quickly and all the time. This is where it gets a little challenging, because this is where my personal story begins. I was actually born in this hospital, the Kokalitsa Indian Hospital. It's located in Sardis, British Columbia. This hospital was founded in 1941 and it closed in 1969. And this is one of the areas that we're really trying to do a lot of work on and expose it to the public, because there's very little information that's been made available about Indian hospitals. There's been quite a lot now to do with residential schools, but not so much about this other part of our dark history. So I was actually born in this Indian hospital. My mom was quarantined with tuberculosis. And at least that's the story that I'm told. And I have not been able to find any records about my mom's actual time that she spent in this hospital. And when she was released, it always takes work in increments to be able to have the strength and the courage to pursue this information. So I haven't gone down that path yet. So I was born here, and my maternal grandparents, which my mom's parents, took me from the hospital and they raised me from birth. So when I decided to start writing about this in my PhD, I was really going through a lot of my own turmoil and trying to reconcile with my own emotional disruption in my being. And it wasn't until Professor Don Pratt made a comment to me or asked me a question, and we call it a 3-minute elevator talk when we're working on our PhD or master's degree work. And he asked me if I could explain to him what my work was about. And I told him that I was taken from the most important person in my life at birth and then raised by grandparents. And he let out a great big gasp and he said, "Oh my God, can you imagine what that must have felt like for your mother?" And that was a turning point for me, because at that point I was thinking about what I was going through, and I actually had not put myself in the shoes of my mom. So that really kind of changed and helped me make some shifts and realize that it wasn't her decision for to be placed in this Indian hospital and for me to not have a relationship with her right from birth. So that sent me on another trajectory to help me to gain a deeper understanding of not only what happened to me, but also to think of, the situation and how the policies and legislation has really interrupted the lives and identities of Indigenous people. I really want to highlight these two authors, First Nations and Higher Education, the 4 R's: respect, relevance, reciprocity, and responsibility. And you'll notice that this Kirkness and Barnhart article came out in 1991. And I just want to say that for some disciplines, and education is one of them, they may think that this article is outdated and they like to keep things quite current, like maybe in the past 7 years or so. But when I've got wind of this article, this is one of the ones that carried me through the completion of my PhD. And I've got a couple of quotes here, and I'll go into it a little bit more when I shut down the PowerPoint. But these are 2 of the standout quotes in the article. From the Indigenous students' perspective, emphasis is on a higher educational system that respects them for who they are, that is relevant to their view of the world, that offers reciprocity in their relationships with others, and that helps them exercise responsibility over their own lives. And for First Nation students, survival often requires a new form of consciousness that not only displaces, but often devalues their Indigenous consciousness. And for many, this is a greater sacrifice than they are willing to make. And this is the one that I really stand on, because when I decided to do the work on my identity, I decided that I wasn't going to leave myself at the door. I wasn't going to make that sacrifice and separate myself from who I am. So that's why I got the strength to be able to look into this whole notion of identity and start exploring it. I would say it's only a beginning. There's still a lot of work that still needs to be done. Also, along the way in my journey, we always call on other helpers, and I decided to use the power of story. And of course, these are the 2 ones that I incorporated into my work: Indigenous story work, educating the heart, mind, body, and spirit, and this is Archibald, and also narrative inquiry, experience and story and qualitative research. This is Clandinin and Connolly, Jean Clandinin and Michael Connolly, and I'll explain how I use these in my work. When I decided that I wanted to do some probing and try and express what it was that I wanted to bring out in the open in regards to my own autobiographical narrative based on my lived experience, I was drawn to narrative inquiry because I felt safety in using this approach because it allowed me to go backward, and forward, inside and out in regards to how I am positioned as a person. And it allowed me to take up my thoughts and to be able to work with them. And this was always done with a very strong critique of care. And it's also very important that we are taking ownership and we're taking the lead in telling our truth. So that's why I chose this particular approach for telling my own story. But when I worked with Elder Jean's story and Colton Wycott's story, the youth, I really needed those stories to come from their voice. It had to be their truth. So that's why I applied Indigenous story work, educating the heart, mind, body, and spirit, to Elder Jean and Colton's stories. And there was a lot of back and forth in regards to making sure that whatever information I was releasing was coming from their voice and their perspective. And also, Jean's stories are traditional stories, and I consider them as a giveaway, which is a gift from Dr. Joanne Archibald's work. So I see my work advancing maybe a step or two, the work of Joanne Archibald, and also explaining how other scholars can assist us as well. And I gained support from Joanne during the process. She was my main supervisor and coach throughout this process. And she had her work has a lot to do with elders. So she was very strong in giving us advice on how to proceed and make sure that we do everything with a very strong ethic of care and honoring the protocols of our people and also of ourselves. Here is Elder Jean William, and this is a quote that she made in the book. She says, "You are not Secwepemc unless you return to the land." Secwepemc Uluch is broken down as follows. Swep means unfolding and spreading out and coming home. Emch is people of, and Uluch is the land of and territory. And how Jean explained it is she said it's okay for us to go out and get an education, and but always to remember where we come from, very similar to my grandfather's teachings, that we're always to remember who we are and where we come from, and to go out and get the education, but to remember our people and do the work to bring it back to them as we continue to grow. I think that's the last slide. That was the last of my slides, so I'm going to go back to my notes now. So I'm going to go a little bit more into explaining about the book and why I did this work. So I drew inspiration from my Secwepemc culture and the teachings of my grandparents. My autobiographical journey blends Indigenous ways of knowing with insight into our cultural identity that transforms into intergenerational learning. In my book, I share my lived experience story. I am joined by Elder Jean William and Youth Colton Wycott from our Secwepemc Nation. I was inspired by the teachings of my grandparents, as the three of us all were collectively. And my grandfather told me again never to forget who I am and where I come from. When I started my education journey at the University of Victoria in 1990, I lacked confidence, yet I had the strength to keep my grandfather's vision at the forefront. He always encouraged me to get an education and to bring it back to my people. It wasn't until I arrived at the University of British Columbia that I decided that I would not walk through the doors of academia and leave myself on the doorstep. Kirkness, Barnhart, Archibald, and Clandinnon helped me reclaim who I am. I wanted to focus on something that would support the history of the Secwepemc people, because this is the nation that I am from. We had received some support of non-Indigenous scholars before us, Elizabeth Furness and Cecilia Haig-Brown, both made contributions on behalf of our people. Now it is so important to tell our stories through our voice. I can honor the sharing of stories and speaking our truth. Drumming Our Way Home is a contribution of personal stories of 3 Secwepemc people that teach about our ways of knowing and being from our standpoint. I wanted to ensure that we are in the driver's seat while we share these stories. I gained strength and courage from Indigenous scholars that have gone before me, and some of them I can name are Margaret Kovach, Kathy Absalon, Sean Wilson. A lot of these Indigenous research scholars, also starting with Linda Tahui Smith way back in 1999, I believe, decolonizing methodologies, and also Graham Smith. These are all very strong scholars that supported us in academia. As mentioned earlier, some of my strength came from Kirkness and Barnhart's article, in their pivotal article. The 4 R's: respect, relevance, reciprocity, and responsibility. Their message is for Indigenous students to enter academia on an equal footing. Their ideas helped me to make the shift and to feel good about my ideas and proceed with my search around identity. I was supported and coached by Joanne Archibald, Kwam Puyem, from the Stolo First Nation. Her guidance helped me to believe in myself and my ability to pursue original and personal teaching stories. And I'm just going to share another story with you regarding Joanne. When she was so kind and supportive in one of her classes, I wanted to pick up the hand drum, because when it's gifted to us, we carry a responsibility to not only look after the hand drum, but a person felt that I was ready to start using the hand drum. So I was so fearful and afraid to even touch the hand drum, but Joanne just provided such an environment of comfort and support that I picked up the hand drum and I started singing along with a taped recording of the Women's Warrior song, which is the one that I can lead so far. It took me a full year at the University of British Columbia with practicing with a group of women drummers, and Alana Young Leon was the leader along with Dorothy Christian, and she was also very gentle and kind. And she really encouraged us to continue to practice how to take the lead. And she said, don't worry if you feel like you're making mistakes or doing it wrong. She's just told us to let that go and just practice. So we were in good hands. So hand drumming is our culture. The hand drum represents our rootedness in our homeland and connection to community. There are several teachings in the book around the hand drum's significance. The drums anchor us and they guide us. During the process, I had to remain true to my community and my nation. So the hand drum represented protocol and protection. The hand drum carries a very high honor in our culture, similar to an eagle feather. To do this work in a good way, I had to be grounded in who I am and where I come from. The hand drum reminded me about why I was doing this work and who I was doing it for. The connection to the hand drum is outlined as my epistemic and theoretical foundation. The drum carries cultural and holistic significance in many areas of Indigenous experiences, and it aligns with our cultures according to their interpretation. So my hope for the readers is that the book will resonate with readers on many different levels. The stories shared in the book are giveaways. which extend from Dr. Archibald's Indigenous storywork, educating the heart, mind, body, and spirit. The stories are personal from 3 different perspectives. It tells about current lived experiences, stories of long ago from Elder Jean, and also the perspective of Colton from an Indigenous youth. And the stories were so rich and amazing from Elder Jean. We learned a lot through the whole process, and it was so comforting to hear about the traditional practices of the Secwepemc people throughout the journey. And Colton Wycott's stories resonated as I grew up in Williams Lake and I went through the public school system. So a lot of the places that he hung out in Williams Lake during the school day, I can just go right back to those days. And his stories also resonated with my time with my 4 children going through the public school systems as well. It feels that not much has changed. We've had some growth and some development, but there's still a lot of work to be done in the public school system as well. So I find that really informative and beneficial to relate to in regards to these stories. The book will speak to readers across intellectual, socioeconomic, and cultural borders. It has a wide appeal for anyone learning about themselves through self-examination while moving to self-actualization. It is an Indigenous approach that incorporates the care and reflexivity of story work as a teaching and learning model. My hope is that it resonates with anyone seeking to engage in reconciliation and cultural interface between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. So regardless of background and culture, I am convinced that the book will touch many lives. My story is grounded in lived experiences that many Indigenous people can relate to. The outreach will be felt by non-Indigenous people as well, who are in search of their own identities, like adoptees, for example. Many challenges of lost identity reside in our DNA. The book can be a reawakening of the spirit, which unlocks the mind and body. Our hope is that the sharing of our personal stories will enlighten readers to consider their own histories and support them on their paths of rediscovery. The stories are meant to be teaching stories. So the strength of the book is intergenerational knowledge transmissions from knowledge keepers to youth. The passing on of Indigenous knowledge was mainly through oral teaching. Through contact, a lot of our ways of knowing and being have diminished. The book offers insights of the importance of grandparents as teachers and caregivers. The strength of the 3 of us came from our grandparents and their influence in our lives. Their teachings kept us informed of our beginnings and the importance of being Secwepemc. I still follow the teachings of my grandparents, and I do my best to honor and respect them. So one of the things when they say that we're not to forget who we are and where we come from, I try to do this work as an ambassador on behalf of my people and my nation. And some of the teachings that I received from growing up with my grandparents is it doesn't matter where we are in the world, that we always have to remember that we are doing what our conduct is also a representation of our communities, of our nation, and of our families. So always to be careful in regards to how we place ourselves in the world is necessary.
Mhm.
So where are we with time?
We have about 20 minutes left.
About 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Because the other thing I would like to do is I'd like to share a reading from the book.
Yeah.
That would be great.
It's one that I select and it relates to the drum. So this it's on page 71 of my book. I moved through a process of telling, retelling, living, and reliving memories of my lived experiences. I recollected the earlier landscapes to the best of my ability. My memories of these landscapes would be more vivid if I had photographs to reflect on. Yet I am satisfied that the memories of my growing up years with my grandparents are the most comforting. I have figuratively placed the memories of my life with them as the most outstanding. My grandparents gifted me with strong values. They continue to be my tower of strength. I understand that it is up to me to retell my story. I am finally able to acknowledge how a single or several traumatic events affected my outlook. I can remain where I am or decide to move forward. I believe my life, with the help of my grandparents' voices, the blood memory, to attain my university degrees. I have seen growth in myself throughout my academic journey at UBC, especially in taking up the responsibility to learn how to drum. I moved from experiencing fear about handling my drum to acquiring the confidence to sing and lead the women's warrior song solo. I gained the understanding of how to restore my history by also thinking about the rhythm of the drum's beat. The reverberations caused by the stroke of the drum beat as it connects with the drum tell me how my grandparents took care of me when their daughter was not able to. By reflecting, I understand how my grandparents took up the family and cultural responsibility to raise their daughter's child. With another stroke of the drumstick, I remember how my grandfather loved me, allowing me to be so close to him by hanging on to his back pocket, and how my uncle showed me how much I was treasured when he bought me the tricycle. My grandparents accomplished what they set out to do, raise a healthy and strong individual. Then the drum goes off beat when memories of rupture and discordance occur, as I remember feelings of not belonging during my earlier school landscapes. The cadence is lost, but then the beat becomes strong again as I gained acceptance in school. The drum continues as I learn to be in sync with a new view of drumming our way home on many fronts. Messages come to me that show growth in my lived experience, and I can rest assured that I have done and continue to do the best that I possibly can. I am sure that this is all my grandparents would wish for.
Wow.
Thank you, Georgina. One of the things that stands out for me in your book, and there's a number of them, is just that photograph of your grandparents. Like, just to still have those. I have some photographs of my great grandmother and her mother together, that are prominent in how I think about the things that you shared about, being respectful, being honorable, upholding those values that they would have held as they walked through the world. But that picture of your grandmother and grandfather, they just look very cool, right? For want of a better word. They're tight together, they're a unit. And also that visual that you shared with us about holding onto your grandfather's back pocket as you walked along, right? Like, instantly connects you back to that person. I bet that visual, that feeling of your grandfather's back pocket. Yeah.
And that reverberation of the drum beat, bringing that sense of belonging to all those who've gone before you. Oh, makes me think of all the educators that tune in to your talk, hearing you frame it through the four R's.
Mhm.
I wonder if you can share more about how do you use the 4 R's in your classroom?
I use the 4 R's I include it in my syllabi, and I open my classes, not all the time, because I use another article looking back to the potlatch is another article that I use. So I try to frame a classroom where we have safety and we also build community. And as I started out this talk, that's what I do in the classroom. We begin with drumming, and we drum a couple songs, and then we practice the protocol. And that's part of the reclamation, where I encourage students who have a language, if they're Indigenous, and that they can practice their own language, or else we learn introductions in the Halkaminam on Vancouver Island. And a lot of the non-Indigenous students by the end of the course are quite fluent in being able to introduce themselves in the language. And they do share with me that there's a pretty high level of fear and discomfort at the beginning. But, that's part of creating the environment, just like Joanne did with us, like they're amazing teachers that really, in order to be able to learn, we need to feel safe, but we also need to have a certain level of discomfort as well, I believe. So.
Well, if there isn't any discomfort, then you probably already know what you're doing, right? Georgina, I was an elementary school teacher for 17 years, and then in other different things in education. So after about 38 years in education, that's what I've come to believe is, for adults, when we're asking adults to take on this work around reconciliation and this work around self-awareness and self-actualization, and then stepping out and actually taking actions to do the things that we're trying to accomplish here in this country, we're asking them to do a little bit of what they ask students to do every single day, right? We ask our students every single day to take risks and take chances and to learn something new about themselves. And if we create that environment for them where it's respectful, it's relevant, there's reciprocity, and there's responsibility, then they're more likely to do that. And you and I and Stephanie have all experienced that sort of environment where it's okay to take those risks, or else you wouldn't have written this book if that wasn't the case, right? So I like that idea. Can you talk a little bit about advice that you give to folks who are on this journey that help them along?
Are you referring to a journey of
reconciliation? I'm mostly thinking about non-Indigenous organizations or people, like it's things that help them move along. I know that there's advice in your book, and there's stories in your book, but for our audience here today, is there anything that jumps to the forefront to say, I have all of these folks in front of me today. This is really what I want them to know.
Well, what I do as part of the education system is to really encourage people to learn about the territory, learn about the people in the territory wherever you're located, or if you're interested in working with Indigenous people, to be able to learn about them as well, wherever you're, considering going to, we've got a big country, and we've got the most diverse province in all of Canada here in BC as well. So really get to know the nations, and it's getting past the performative. It's really taking heart and really recognizing, to be true and to be real about intentions, and also to really develop very strong relationships. And I say that because in doing my own work, because I'm Indigenous, it doesn't mean that everybody is going to accept me either. I have to put in the work too, whenever I'm going into community. And We've also got a very long history of mistrust with any institutions, with organizations, with federal and provincial governments. So that also needs to be managed. And people need to, have that awareness, like sometimes for intergenerational survivors and residential school survivors, we might not even be able to walk into a building. That's how severe the memories are from the experiences, and also just to, I think, have some empathy and compassion. I did say in the book, maybe I can refer to it at the end, because I was getting a little bit cranky by the time I got to the end of this book.
I know, yeah.
We get so tired of people telling us to just get over it. And I was asked about residential schools by a journalist, and what I had to share didn't seem to be that important. And I wrote about it in the last part of the book, where I say, don't ask me to bleed, because it's the sensationalism, but the experience that I have gone through is internal. It's something, from the inside that I'm trying to work through, and it's not, like the journalist approaches where, it's kind of more hidden, I guess, that you can't see it. So then it's not newsworthy. That's what I talk about in here. But yeah, this whole idea about telling us to get over it, I think we need to really move way past that now. Because this is part of the truth telling, and I try to be really careful about how I wrote the book, and you want people to read it and to understand it. So I not only thought about myself and Elder Jean and Colton, I also was trying to put myself in the eyes of the public and who is reading this book, and how it would benefit them, how it could possibly help. But yeah.
Georgina, I thought you did a beautiful job of Elder Jean's and Colton's voices coming through as well. And I wanted to highlight that, because that in itself is a protocol of creating space for other voices to step up to the stage that might not always take that opportunity or be given that chance. One of the pieces of advice to a colleague of mine many years ago, who was non-Indigenous, but was going to sit at those tables, the advice that was given to him was go and hear from the people, so that you are able to carry their voice to tables that they'll never get a chance to sit at. And I thought that was terrific advice for him. He took it well to heart and spent a lot of time with Indigenous relatives around the province, so that he could really listen and be able to carry their voices to those tables that they would never get to sit at.
In the book also, there's a very strong theme of our connection to grandparents. And Jean has a very similar story to mine, where she was raised by grandparents as well. And we get into a rut sometimes, kind of feeling like we're unwanted, without knowing the complete story. And I did get into some of those feelings off and on. But when Jean explained to me during her traditional, the traditional practices of our people, and she said that our people were never put in old age homes. They always stayed at home, and quite often they would choose a grandchild that they would raise, and in turn, that child would look after them when they needed help later on in their later years. So our people were never put into these homes. They stayed in the home, and that's what Jean practiced with grandparents.
I just want to share a really nice comment from Tara Cooper. She said to you, Georgina, I deeply appreciate every word you are saying. I'm humbled by your ways, your writing, your acknowledgement of those who have supported you, and the graciousness and compassion you're offering to all of us in today's talk. So hi to Tara for that beautiful comment. Mhm.
Georgina, our brother Lawrence is away to work, so he had his opening. I'm wondering if you could close us with a song on the drum.
Yep, I'll close with the Women's Warrior song.
Lovely. Thank you.
I usually stand to do the drum, but I don't think you'll see me if I stand. Okay, so as explained, the Women's Warrior song came to me when I learned how to lead it when I was doing my PhD at UBC. And we're also taught to honor the protocol of the songs. So before we do that, I'd just like to share that the song came from Martina Pierre and Faye Nelson in Mount Currie. And the song came to Martina in the sweat. It is a song for women because we are the life givers and the caretakers of our communities, from babies all the way up to elders. We hear it a lot in the missing and murdered women's marches, and also the land defenders use this song, and it's also a prayer song. So before I begin, we have one beat for each of the 4 directions and a succession of shorter beats to call the ancestors forward to be with us here. And I do 2 on the drum, 1 off the drum, and then the last one back to the drum. So here we go.
Auntie, I can't hear you.
Ya-hi-yo, hey, hey, ya-hi-yo, ya-hi-yo, hey, hey, ya-hi-yo, hey, 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 ya-hi-yo, ya-hi-yo, hey, hey, ya-hi-yo, ya-hi-yo, hey, hey, ya-hi-yo. For all my relations.
I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I want to thank our special guest, Dr. Georgina Martin. As Carrie mentioned in the chat here, Georgina's books on our website, 20% off at the UBC Press. Thank you again, Dr. Georgina, for helping us on this journey, helping all of our people who've joined us today on their personal and professional journeys around reconciliation. And we hope to get to talk to you again.
Thank you.
All right, gracias.